Welcome back to the Stuff stage here at CES 2016. I'm Richard Taylor. Now, the world of photography has a new player to shake up the established order. It's a truly unique product with no fewer than 16 lenses. It takes photos up to 52 megapixels. It has no moving parts, but has an optical zoom of almost 5 times. And here to tell us all about it is Dave Grannan, the co-founder of Light. Tell us about the Light 16, the L16, I should say. This looks like a truly unique product.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it is. We're really excited about it. As you said, the L16 has 16 cameras in it with a true optical zoom of 35 to 150 millimeters. What's remarkable about this little camera is it replaces a full bag of gear. So a full-frame digital SLR and 4 big, heavy glass lenses that would set you back about $5,000, and you need a backpack to carry it around in, right?
So it's not a traditional, there's no full frame sensor here. There's lots of small sensors, I guess, because each lens has its own sensor to capture the light coming in.
That's right. Each camera has its own sensor, and depending on where the user zooms with their shot, we select 10 of those 16 to fire, and then computational imaging puts those together to give you one 52 megapixel photo.
So you say it can replace the DSLR. It looks more like a bulky smartphone. It takes images which look like DSLR images. Let's see if we can actually put up on some video here, if we can, some of the images that it takes.
This one. Smile. Tease.
Just turn on this. Hold it right there.
Phone and you've taken that picture at night or tried to zoom to catch your daughter on the soccer field, you realize you get kind of a grainy nothing.
Right. So what's enabling the fantastic low light capabilities? Is it the fact that you've got lots of different lenses and sensors combined together?
That's one part of it, right? By combining 10 sensors on every shot and collecting 10 times the amount of light you normally would, that's one trick. The other thing...
So it's 10, just to be clear, even though there are 16 lenses and sensors, only 10 are firing at any one time.
That's right. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because that's really the optimal number we need. What we do something called tiling. If we're framing a scene, we'll fire a number of cameras to get the background of the scene, and then we'll take the higher focal length and tile, or get quadrants, if you will, of the picture to stitch those together. That kind of optimizes the resolution, and beyond that you get a bit of diminishing returns. The other thing we can do, though, is because we're taking 10 pictures simultaneously, we can set the exposure times differently. So if you've got a scene where there's some bright light coming through the window and some dark areas, we'll overexpose some to get the dark areas. That means your highlights will be blown out, but that's okay because we've got other cameras that can catch those.
So effectively this is a new approach to HDR photography, high dynamic range, where you can combine and blend the best parts, the properly exposed parts of all the images.
That's exactly right, and it goes one step better in that it's simultaneous capture, right? So with traditional HDR, if something's moving in the scene, then your picture's ruined.
Now, it's a very interesting approach, and just to be clear, when you talk about shallow depth of field, with this particular camera, you can actually adjust the focal point after you've taken the shot. You can effectively adjust the depth of field afterwards in a kind of truly lifelike fashion, as if you'd taken the photo with a different focal length. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. There are great degrees of control in post-production with a camera like this. Being computational, you're able to really have infinite depth of field, infinite focus control to get the exact shot you want.
Now, you've got some imagery of the insides and the internals of the camera. Just explain a little bit more about how the science works and how this actually capturing all the different light into the different sensors, because some of the sensors and some seem to be pointing straight out, but others are, you've got the optical zoom, but of course we're used to seeing an optical zoom with something moving in and out of the camera, but yours is actually traveling along the body of the camera.
Along the body, exactly. We use something called folded optics. So if you were to do a cutaway of the camera, this is what you would see. There are 5 35 millimeter cameras that point straight out. There are these mid-length ones that are 70 millimeters and long that are 150, and that's where the mirrors come into play, right? The light comes through the aperture, strikes the mirror, and travels down a barrel of lenses because you need that light travel for long focal length, right?
Now, it's a very bold approach. I remember a company 4 or 5 years ago, I did some stuff on a company called Lightro that used light field photography, a very different approach from the established order. That company's still around, but they've pivoted a bit. Also allowing post-focusing after you take the photos. They struggled to make an impact. Their camera was also reasonably expensive. Your camera sells for how much?
$16.99.
So $1,700. That's the price of an SLR with maybe a reasonable beginner kit lens on it. How worried are you that people spending that kind of money are going to be reluctant to go away from the Olympus, the Nikon, the Canons of this world?
Well, we think that, as compared to Litro, it's a different problem we were setting out to solve, right? We were trying to set out to solve the problem of size, cost, and weight of high-end DSLR systems, right? What we find over and over again is half of all people who buy a nice camera, when you survey them, they don't use it anymore, right?
Too heavy.
Too heavy, exactly what they say.
I do have that problem myself. Yeah.
They bought it because they're getting married, having a child, taking the bucket list trip.
Right.
And they've abandoned it not because they don't love great photography, they do. They've abandoned it for the convenience factor.
Right.
We've been overwhelmed with the response so far. We started pre-selling the camera, taking pre-orders. In October, we're stopping that now because we've exhausted our supply chain for what we can build in the summer. So early numbers are very encouraging at that price point because, again, we're replacing something that's arguably $4,000 or $5,000.
Right. Although I guess what this can't do is get a focal length greater than 150 mil. You can't have lens doublers on. So you're limited from that point of view. You can't do very, very super wide angle stuff on this, can you? Or can you?
There's no technology limit, right? That's just a product choice right now. We were picking a range to go to 35 to 150. We'll have other SKUs as we move forward that address macro needs and longer, sports nature photography.
What other features does it have on it? Does it have GPS? Does it have Wi-Fi? It has video. But so tell me about the video capabilities and some of the other functions.
Yeah, so it's an Android operating system, GPS and Wi-Fi enabled device. So
and it's touch screen at the back, is it?
Yeah, it's a 5-inch LCD HD touch screen on the back.
And you can do all the processing of the photos in camera, can you?
That's right.
And then spit it out as a JPEG.
The camera can give any format you want: JPEG, TIFF, DNG, RAW format, and we'll have a very photo stream-like experience. So when you come into the home, the pictures are automatically uploaded to your.
I've always been fascinated by photography.
We can geo-stamp the pictures with the GPS as well. So it really is a modern electronic.
Right. So you can post to social and.
Yeah, you can post to Instagram, Facebook, etc., directly from the camera.
And the video side of things?
And on the video side, we shoot 4K video. We don't yet, the computational magic you were talking about, focusing after the fact, that won't be in version 1. Version 1 is really optimized around still photography, not a limitation of the technology. But we will have 4K with true optical zoom. So that same range, 35 to 150 millimeter at 4K, we think is pretty nice video to have.
Yeah, and I guess that does actually solve a real problem because with DSLR video, focusing needs to be so precise, and often it's not. And so if you can actually focus again after the fact, my God, that's a huge win. And I remember at the Litro cameras, I thought if they could only do this with video, then it'd be solving a real problem. So tell me about the company itself. What about Light? How many of you are you? Where are you based? And how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, so we're based in Palo Alto, California. There are 65 people in the company now. My co-founder, Rajiv Laroya, really is the brainchild. Rajiv's, one of these incredibly smart people. He's too humble to admit it, but he's the one that invented LTE. So if you look at that little LTE, that's what his last company did. And when I first met him,
not a bad track record.
Not a bad track record. He said, look, I've got all these lenses, and I'm getting older. My back's breaking, and I figured somebody was going to solve this problem. When nobody did, I decided to. Now, if I heard that from anybody else on the planet, I would say you just missed the crazy train to Silicon Valley, right? So there's another one coming along. But knowing it was Rajiv, I put a lot of credibility into that. We put a company together and got going, and now we've delivered a product.
Ultimately, how would you define success? Because clearly you're not going to be able to break the established order of the Canons, the Nikons. Are you looking to carry on with your own hardware? Will you think about licensing your technology? Could we see this kind of technology maybe in a smaller form factor in a smartphone? It looks like it could be that kind of form factor. Where could it go for you?
Absolutely. So, we really think that that any market that needs high quality, long focal length, particularly optics in small packages, is a great market. So absolutely, you will see this in smartphones in the future.
I guess it's a question of price point, right?
That's right. But, you know, and we think part of the value add is when you look at a lot of the markets, particularly the Android market, it's kind of a commodity race to the bottom, right? Everybody makes a black rectangle of glass that runs Android, does the same thing. So, gee, if I could put the equivalent of a high-end DSLR in that device, that's compelling.
And in terms of market, as I say, how would you define success? You're obviously aiming this at the higher end, but you're looking, I guess, just to kind of get people in who are fed up of lugging their big DSLRs, but who have $1,700 to spend on photography because they're passionate about it.
Yeah, and maybe it is a little, it's a little immodest or a little ambitious, but you know, we really think we're going to reinvent photography, right? You know, I remember.
Got to aim high, right?
You know, when I was a kid, you'd have a big cathode ray tube TV, right, on a credenza. Well, nobody has that anymore, right? You've got a flat panel, right?
Right.
The same way, in 6 or 8 years, nobody's going to make optics the way they do today. It'll be quaint. It'll be antiquated. You know, why would you put all that effort, cost, size, and weight when you can make very small, high-quality optic systems?
I guess the only response from the established guard would be, well, we have innovated. We've made the Micro Four Thirds. We have very compact DSLR-like cameras at a fraction of the weight these days. I'm thinking of the new Sony cameras and some of the new Nikons, the Olympus, the Micro Four Thirds. So they've gone down a different path. They haven't chosen the path of radical innovation. Does that worry you that sometimes you're out on this island going so bold that it could all just kind of end in tears?
Yeah, I always worry about that.
Right.
But I think the reality is that's why startups exist, right? It's very hard for incumbents to cannibalize their own, you know, in the case of the camera market, all the money they make on aftermarket accessories and lenses, to really think out of the box is unusual when an established company is playing in a known field.
So I guess one final question is, if I'm buying this camera and I'm spending $1,700 on a camera from a startup, what guarantee is there going to be for me that in 3 years' time, you guys are still going to be around?
Yeah. Well, hopefully a lot of our credentials speak to that, right? We're not a product that went out on Kickstarter to raise money or something like that.
Right. Where's your funding from?
Well funded by Bessemer Venture Partners, Charles River Venture Partners.
Right. So you got VC funding.
VCs, yeah. So very well funded. We raised $35 million to build this camera, and world-class partners. So the people manufacturing this device under license from us are Foxconn, and as you know, they make most of the iPhones in the world. So we've got, you know, great investors, great funding, and world-class partners.
Well, it's a very bold and hugely ambitious project. I wish you the best of luck with it. Many thanks indeed. Do stay with us here on the Stuff Stage at CES 2016. Plenty more still to come, including a new take on the smartwatch.